They dragged him like a sack of trash across the immaculate white floors of Terminal 4. Two young, arrogant TSA agents, laughing as they hauled a filthy, bearded man toward the exit doors, while hundreds of travelers watched in silence. To the tourists recording on their phones, he looked like a stain on the scenery, a vagrant, a nuisance, a nobody who had wandered in from the cold. But as his worn-out boots scraped against the tiles, a small, tattered leather wallet slipped from his pocket. It hit the ground, and a single, heavy, laminated ID card spun across the floor, coming to a stop at the feet of the shift supervisor. The supervisor bent down, annoyed, ready to toss the lost property in the bin and get back to work. But when the overhead lights hit the holographic seal on that card, and his eyes focused on the red text stamped across the bottom, the color drained from his face so fast, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His hands started to tremble violently. He looked at the bum on the floor, then back at the card, and realized with a sick, sinking feeling that his men hadn't just assaulted a homeless man, they had just laid hands on a legend. And the name on that ID was about to bring the entire airport to a standstill. There is a specific sound that echoes through an airport terminal when things go wrong. It isn't the announcement of a delayed flight, and it isn't the crying of an exhausted toddler near the baggage claim. It is the sudden, sharp silence that falls over a crowd when violence erupts in a place designed for order. It is the sound of breathless shock. On a Tuesday evening in November, inside the sprawling, polished cavern of Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport, that silence hit like a hammer. It happened near Checkpoint B, the busiest vein of the airport's beating heart. One moment, thousands of travelers were rushing, checking watches and dragging roller bags. The next, they were frozen, phones raised, recording a scene of humiliation that would be viewed by millions before the sun rose the next morning. Two burly TSA agents were dragging a man across the pristine terrazzo floor. The man was a mess of rags and grime, a stark, ugly contrast to the gleaming duty-free shops and the bright, fluorescent lights. He was limp, not fighting back, his boots scuffing against the tile with a sound that made people wince. He looked like the debris of the city that had blown in through the automatic doors, a problem to be swept away. But this wasn't just a removal, it was a spectacle. And the supervisor running the shift, a man who prided himself on spotting threats before they happened, was about to look down at a piece of plastic that had fallen from the homeless man's pocket and realize, with a sick lurch of his stomach, that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He was about to realize that the trash his men were dragging out wasn't trash at all. He was royalty. To understand how a hero ends up being treated like garbage, we have to understand the ecosystem of the airport. It is a city within a city, governed by strict hierarchies. At the top are the pilots and the first-class passengers. At the bottom are the invisible people, the cleaners, maintenance crews, and the lost souls who drift into the terminals seeking heat during the brutal New York winters. Officer Greg Miller was 26 years old, and he loved the hierarchy. He loved it because, out on the street, he was nobody. But in here, with his blue shirt, his badge, and his radio, he was the law. Miller was the kind of security officer who mistook cruelty for authority. He had been on shift for 6 hours, dealing with entitled passengers complaining about taking off their shoes, and he was itching for a target he could actually bite back at. That target appeared in the form of an old man sitting quietly on a bench near the ticketing counters. The man was bundled in an oversized, stained army surplus coat. His beard was a thicket of gray and white, matted and unkempt. A beanie was pulled low over his forehead, obscuring his eyes. He wasn't begging. He wasn't yelling at the air. He was simply sitting, hands folded in his lap, staring up at the departure board with an intensity that was almost unsettling. He smelled of rain and old wool, a scent that cut through the sterile aroma of floor wax and coffee. Miller spotted him from 50 feet away. To Miller, this man was a stain on the uniform of the airport. He signaled to his partner, a rookie named Davis who was too nervous to disagree with the senior officer. "Watch this," Miller said, hitching up his belt. "I'm gonna clear out the riffraff. We got VIPs coming through in an hour. Don't need the place smelling like a dumpster. Miller marched over, his boots striking the floor with purpose. He didn't start with a question. He started with a command. "Hey, you! Up! Now!" The old man didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He kept his eyes locked on the screen, watching the flight status for a plane heading to Frankfurt. Miller stepped into the man's line of sight, blocking the screen. "I said move it, Grandpa. This isn't a homeless shelter. You got a ticket?" The old man finally looked at Miller. His eyes were startlingly clear, a piercing icy blue surrounded by a web of deep wrinkles. There was no fear in those eyes. That should have been Miller's first warning. Homeless men usually looked afraid or confused or apologetic. This man looked patient, like a parent waiting for a tantrum to end. "I am waiting," the man said. His voice was gravel, rough from disuse, but steady. "Waiting for what? The mothership?" Miller laughed, glancing back at Davis for approval. "You can wait outside. It's 40 degrees. Should keep you fresh. Let's go." "I am not leaving," the man said. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stated it as a fact, as immovable as a mountain. That was the spark. Miller couldn't handle defiance. Not from someone who looked like this. He grabbed the man's arm. The fabric of the coat was stiff and greasy. "I'm not asking. You're trespassing on federal property. You move, or I move you." The old man pulled his arm back. It was a sharp, controlled movement. "Do not touch me, son. Son." The word dripped with a condescension that made Miller see red. He keyed his radio. "Control, this is Miller at Checkpoint B. I have a non-compliant 1031, requesting backup for removal." He didn't wait for the backup. He nodded to Davis. "Grab him." What happened next was ugly. Miller and Davis yanked the man from the bench. He was heavier than he looked, a dense weight of dead calmness. He didn't swing at them. He didn't scream. He just went limp, forcing them to drag his dead weight. It was a passive resistance technique, one used by protesters, but it looked pathetic to the bystanders. "Let's go! Get him out of here!" Miller grunted, straining against the old man's surprising density. Travelers stopped. A woman in a business suit gasped. "Is that necessary? He's an old man." "Back up, ma'am. Federal security," Miller barked, feeling the adrenaline of the performance. "This man is a security threat." They dragged him past the kiosks. The old man's boots scraped loudly. His hat fell off, revealing a scar that ran from his temple into his hairline. A jagged, ugly thing. But Miller didn't care about scars. He cared about the exit doors. As they reached the heavy glass doors of the vestibule, the old man's coat snagged on a metal stanchion. The ripping sound was loud. The man stumbled, and Miller shoved him forward. The momentum caused the man to trip, and he hit the floor hard. The impact jarred something loose from the inner pocket of the surplus coat. It was an old leather wallet, worn smooth by decades of use. It hit the ground and skidded across the tiles, bursting open. Papers fluttered out, a few dollar bills, and a hard plastic ID card encased in a heavy laminate. "Get up!" Miller yelled, reaching down to haul the man up by his collar. "Stop!" The voice boomed across the terminal. It wasn't the homeless man. It was a voice of absolute authority. Supervisor Frank Martinez was running toward them. Martinez was a legend at JFK. He had been working security since before the towers fell. He had seen everything. He was a man who knew the difference between a threat and a tragedy. He had been watching the scene unfold from the mezzanine, and he had sprinted down the escalator, his heart hammering a warning rhythm against his ribs. Martinez pushed through the circle of onlookers. He looked at Miller, his eyes blazing. "Let him go, Miller. Step back." "Boss, he's resisting. He's a vagrant refusing to—" "I said step back," Martinez roared. Miller released the old man, who slumped against the glass wall, breathing heavily. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Martinez looked down at the floor. He saw the wallet. He saw the scattered papers. And then he saw the ID. The terminal lights caught the holographic seal on the card. It wasn't a driver's license. It wasn't a standard government employee ID. It was blue, with a gold stripe running diagonally across it. Martinez froze. He had only seen an ID like that once in his 25-year career, and it had been in a training manual. He slowly knelt, his knees cracked, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the crowd. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he reached out and picked up the card. He turned it over. He read the name. He read the rank. And then he read the designation printed in bold red letters at the bottom. Code 1. Medal of Honor recipient. Permanent security clearance, level 5. Name: Colonel Jameson R. West, USAF, Retay. Designation: Air Marshal Commander, Retay. Martinez felt the blood drain from his face. It felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He looked at the photo on the ID. It was a younger man, clean-shaven, jaw set like steel, wearing a dress uniform heavy with ribbons. He looked up at the homeless man, at the grime, the beard, the exhaustion. But beneath the ruin, he saw the eyes, the same steel blue eyes. Martinez looked at the other papers scattered on the floor. There was a folded, yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Miracle over the Atlantic. Air Marshal saves 300 on hijacked Flight 99. There was a picture of a man being carried on shoulders. A hero. Martinez looked up at Miller. His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "Miller, what did you do?" Miller looked confused, his arrogance wavering. "What? He's a bum, Frank. Look at him." "You idiot," Martinez hissed, standing up, clutching the ID like it was a holy relic. "You complete, absolute idiot." Martinez turned to the old man. The supervisor, a man who answered to almost no one, bowed his head. "Colonel West?" The old man adjusted his coat. He looked at Martinez. "It's been a long time, Frank. You were just a rookie on the gate when I retired." The crowd gasped. The twist in the air was palpable. The smartphones were still recording, but the narrative had shifted instantly. "You know him?" Miller stammered. "Know him?" Martinez turned on his subordinate, his face purple with rage. "You just dragged Colonel Jameson West across the floor like a sack of garbage. This man isn't homeless, you moron. He's the reason we have a job. He's the reason planes don't fall out of the sky." Martinez turned back to the crowd, addressing everyone, his voice trembling with emotion. 30 years ago, before half of you were born, this man was the lead air marshal on transcontinental Flight 99. 3 terrorists took the cockpit, with plastic explosives taped to their chests. They were going to fly it into the White House. Silence. Absolute silence. "The military was 5 minutes away from shooting the plane down," Martinez continued, gesturing to the man on the floor. "Everyone on board was dead. That was the call. But Colonel West was in seat 4C. He didn't have a weapon. He had a drink tray and his bare hands. He breached the cockpit. He took out 3 armed men in a pressurized cabin at 30,000 feet. He flew the plane for 2 hours with a shattered collarbone and landed it in Newfoundland. He saved 312 souls that day." Martinez looked at Miller. "He is the only air marshal in history to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor for action aboard a civilian aircraft. He wrote the manual on close-quarters combat that you slept through in training." Miller looked like he was going to vomit. He stared at the old man, who was slowly getting to his feet. "But why?" Miller whispered. "Why does he look like this?" The colonel brushed the dust off his coat. He spoke for himself this time. "Because I lost my wife on a Tuesday," he said softly. 20 years ago. She was coming to meet me. Flight 601. It crashed on the runway in the fog. Right out there. He pointed toward the massive glass windows overlooking the tarmac. "I come here every year on the anniversary," the colonel said. "I sit on the bench where she was supposed to meet me. I watch the board. I imagine her flight landing. It's my pilgrimage, son. I dress this way because I don't want to be recognized. I don't want salutes. I don't want handshakes. I just want to be with her." He looked at Miller. "I just wanted to sit." The weight of those words crushed the room. The cruelty of the situation was laid bare. A hero, broken by grief, seeking a moment of peace in the place where his life ended, only to be assaulted by the very system he helped build. Martinez stepped forward. "Colonel, There are no words. I am relieving Officer Miller of duty immediately. I will personally escort you to the VIP lounge. We can get you cleaned up, get you a meal." The colonel shook his head. "No, Frank. I don't want a lounge. I don't want special treatment." He bent down and picked up his wallet. He tucked the ID back inside. "I just want you to teach your men something," the colonel said, his voice firming up, the command returning. "You teach them that the uniform doesn't make them superior. It makes them servants. You teach them that you don't judge a man by the coat he wears, because you never know what that coat has been through." He walked over to Miller. The young guard was shaking, terrified. The colonel reached out. Miller flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, the colonel placed a hand on Miller's shoulder. "You're young," the colonel said. "You're stupid. You think power is force. Power is control, and the greatest control is kindness. You lost control today, son. You let the badge wear you." The colonel patted his shoulder. "Don't let me see you here next year." With that, Colonel Jameson West turned and walked away. He didn't walk toward the exit. He walked back toward the bench. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. No one filmed anymore. It felt disrespectful. They just watched. Supervisor Martinez stood there, watching the old man sit back down. He turned to Miller. "Give me your badge," Martinez said quietly. "Sir, Badge, gun, radio. Now." Miller unclipped his badge with trembling fingers. He handed it over. "Get out of my terminal," Martinez said. "And if I ever see you working security again, even at a mall kiosk, I will make sure everyone knows you're the man who dragged a Medal of Honor recipient through the dirt." Miller walked away, head down, shrinking under the gaze of hundreds of disgusted passengers. The colonel sat on the bench. He looked up at the board. The flight to Frankfurt was boarding. He wasn't watching that line, though. He was looking at the empty space where Flight 601 would have been 20 years ago. A young woman, a college student who had been filming, walked up to the bench. She hesitated, then reached into her bag. She pulled out a hot coffee she had just bought. She placed it gently on the seat next to him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the 300 people." The colonel looked at the coffee. Then he looked at her and gave a small, sad smile. "Thank you, miss." Throughout the night, it happened again and again. Airport staff, pilots, and passengers walked by. They didn't disturb him. They didn't ask for selfies. They simply nodded. Some left food. Some left flowers. The captain of a British Airways 747 walked over, took off his hat, and stood at attention for a full minute before walking to his gate. The TSA agents, the ones who hadn't been fired, formed a loose perimeter. They weren't guarding him from the people. They were guarding his peace. They stood with their backs to him, eyes scanning the crowd, ensuring that for the rest of the night, Colonel West was the safest man in America. As the sun began to rise over JFK, painting the tarmac in shades of orange and purple, Martinez walked over with a fresh coat, a heavy wool pea coat he had bought from the duty-free shop with his own money. "Colonel," Martinez said softly, "it's morning." The colonel blinked, pulling himself out of his memories. He looked at the coat Martinez was holding. "Your shift over, Frank?" "Yes, sir." "Mine too," the colonel said. He stood up, his joints popped. He took the new coat. He didn't say thank you. The look in his eyes was enough. He put it on. It fit perfectly. "I'll drive you home, sir," Martinez offered. "No need," the colonel said. "I like the train. It gives me time to think." He began to walk toward the exit. But this time, he wasn't being dragged. He was walking with a limp, yes, but his head was high. As he reached the sliding doors, he stopped and looked back at the terminal, at the chaos, the noise, the endless stream of humanity rushing to get somewhere else. "Frank?" "Yes, Colonel." "Make sure they know," he said, gesturing to the young guards at the checkpoint. "Make sure they know that everyone who walks through those doors has a story. Some are running to something, some are running from something, and some are just standing still because they have nowhere else to go. Treat them all like they're carrying the nuclear codes." "I will, sir." The colonel nodded. and walked out into the cold New York morning. The video of the incident went viral, of course, but not in the way Miller had hoped. It became a teaching moment for every security agency in the country. The image of the homeless man's ID became a symbol, a reminder that in America, you cannot judge a book by its cover, and you certainly cannot judge a soldier by his scars. Officer Miller never worked in law enforcement again. The internet has a long memory, but the most lasting change happened at Terminal 4. If you go there today, near Checkpoint B, there is a bench. It's a standard airport bench, but there is a small brass plaque on the wall behind it. It's discreet. Most people miss it. It reads, "Reserved for Colonel West, for those who wait." And every year, on a Tuesday in November, the staff at JFK knows the drill. No matter how busy it is, no matter how backed up the lines are, that bench stays empty. A cup of hot coffee is placed there, steam rising into the air, waiting for the old man in the wool coat to come and visit the ghost of his past. Because in the end, true nobility isn't found in a VIP lounge or a first-class seat. It's found in the quiet dignity of a man who has lost everything, yet still carries himself with the grace of the hero he never stopped being. The supervisor learned that lesson the hard way, and as he watched the colonel disappear into the sunrise that morning, he realized something that would stay with him forever. The most important ID a man carries isn't in his wallet, it's in his soul, and no amount of dirt can cover that up.